In a quiet African village, where red dust clung to bare feet and mornings smelled of firewood and fresh hope, lived a little girl named Amara. She was not loud. She was not troublesome. She was the kind of child adults often forgot was even there. Amara used to have a mother. Her mother's laughter once filled their small home. Her hands were warm, her voice gentle. But sickness is cruel, and poverty is crueler. One rainy night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Amara lost her mother forever. From that night on, the world became colder. Her father tried. At least in the beginning. A year later, he brought another woman into the house. Her name was Nolitha. She came with neatly braided hair, shiny earrings, and a smile that fooled everyone in the village. "She will take care of you," Amara's father said. Amara believed him. That was her first mistake. At first, Nolitha acted kind, especially when people were watching. But behind closed doors, her voice sharpened like a knife. "Why are you always here? Didn't your mother teach you anything? You eat too much for a child who does nothing." Amara was only 7. She didn't understand hatred. She only understood fear. Soon, chores replaced childhood. While other children went to school, Amara stayed home. She fetched water before sunrise. She cooked. She cleaned. If one plate was dirty, she was beaten. If food was late, she was cursed. And when Amara cried, Nolitha said, "Stop pretending. You are not my child." 1 month later, Amara's father left for the city in search of work. "I'll come back soon," he promised. He never knew. That promise would destroy his daughter's life. With him gone, Nolitha dropped the mask completely. Food became smaller. Punishments became harsher. Love disappeared. To Nolitha, Amara was not a child. She was a burden. One early morning, when the village was still asleep, Nolitha shook Amara awake. "Get up." Amara rubbed her eyes. "Where are we going?"
she asked softly.
Nolitha did not answer. She tied Amara's sandals, grabbed her hand, and led her away from the house. They walked past the farms, past the familiar paths, deep into the forest. Amara's heart began to beat fast. "Auntie, I'm tired," she whispered. "Quiet," Nolitha snapped. Finally, they stopped in a place Amara had never seen before. Tall trees. No houses. No voices. Nolitha pointed to a rock. "Sit." Amara obeyed. "I'm going to get something," Nolitha said. "Don't move." Amara nodded. She waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The forest grew silent. The sun moved, and slowly, fear wrapped around her small body. "Auntie?" she called. No answer. She ran. She cried. But Nolitha was already gone. That day, a woman walked back to the village alone, believing she had erased a problem forever. But destiny was watching. And destiny never forgets. The forest did not care that Amara was alone. The trees stood tall and silent. The wind whispered through the leaves like secrets she was too young to understand. Amara walked until her legs burned. Her sandals tore. Her feet bled. Still, she walked, because stopping felt like dying. By midday, the sun was cruel. Her throat was dry. Her stomach twisted with hunger. "Mama!" she whispered, though she knew no one would answer. She finally collapsed near a fallen tree. Tears soaked the red earth beneath her. "I'll be good," she cried. "I won't eat much. I won't complain." But the forest did not respond. As evening approached, strange sounds filled the air. Birds, insects, and things Amara had never heard before. Fear gripped her chest. She curled into herself, shaking. That was when she heard footsteps. "Slow! Careful!" Amara froze. Out of the bushes stepped an old woman. Her back was bent. Her clothes were worn. Her face carried 1,000 wrinkles and 1,000 stories. She held a walking stick and a basket of firewood. When her eyes met Amara's, she stopped. "Child?" the woman whispered. Amara tried to speak, but only a sob came out. The old woman rushed forward. "What are you doing here alone?" she asked gently. Amara looked up, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She said she would come back, Amara murmured. The old woman understood instantly. Her expression hardened, not with anger, but pain. Oh, my child, she sighed. She lifted Amara onto her back without hesitation. My name is McKenna, she said, and tonight you will not sleep in the forest. McKenna's hut was small, made of mud and tin, but to Amara, it felt like a palace. McKenna washed her feet, cleaned her wounds, gave her warm porridge. Amara ate slowly, afraid the food might disappear. No rush, McKenna smiled. You are safe now. That word, safe, made Amara cry harder than she ever had. Days passed, then weeks. Amara stayed. McKenna asked no questions she wasn't ready to answer. She never raised her voice, never struck her. Instead, she taught her how to grind maize, how to tend a small garden, how to sing old village songs. At night, McKenna told stories by the fire. Stories about justice, about truth, about how life always repays its debts. Slowly, Amara began to heal, but not everyone welcomed her presence. Some villagers whispered, "That child brings bad luck. Where did she come from? Why is McKenna feeding another mouth?" McKenna heard them. She did not care. God brought her to me, she said calmly, and God does not make mistakes. One afternoon, while fetching water, Amara saw children her age walking to school. She stopped and watched. Her eyes followed them until they disappeared. That night, McKenna noticed her silence. Do you want to learn? McKenna asked softly. Amara nodded, barely breathing. I want to read, she said, so I can tell my own story one day. McKenna smiled. The next morning, she sold her only goat. With that money, she bought Amara a uniform and books. Far away, in another village, Nolitha slept peacefully. She believed her secret was buried in the forest. She laughed more, spent more, enjoyed life. She never looked back, but fate was already moving. Quietly, patiently, and every step Amara took forward was one step closer to a reckoning no one could escape. Years passed, and Amara was no longer the small, frightened girl left in the forest. At 12, she'd grown taller, her eyes shining with intelligence, courage, and a quiet strength that even the village elders noticed. She woke every morning with the sunrise, tending McKenna's garden, learning herbs and grinding maize. But the most important thing she learned was how to grow beyond fear. McKenna gave her books, and soon Amara could read fluently. Every night, she read stories of wisdom, courage, and justice from old scrolls and tattered pages McKenna had collected over the years. Knowledge is the sword that fear cannot touch, McKenna said. Amara repeated it in her mind every day, and it became her guiding mantra. Meanwhile, in the village she had once called home, Nolitha's life was still golden in appearance. Her husband worked tirelessly in the city, unaware of her cruelty. She spent money freely, laughed at the village gatherings, and enjoyed the luxury of her small privileges. But cracks were forming. Her beauty, which had masked her heart's darkness, began to fade. Wrinkles crept around her eyes. Her hands, once soft, were now rough and stained with work she had not done herself. And deep inside, a restlessness began, a shadow she could not name. Back with Amara, a turning point came when she was 15. A traveling healer came to the village, and Amara watched closely. She learned not just herbs, but the way people spoke, the way eyes betrayed hidden thoughts, the silent language of human hearts. By 16, Amara was not just surviving, she was thriving. People came from neighboring villages seeking advice for illness, for help with childbirth, or for guidance through disputes. And quietly, Amara began saving money from small herbs she sold. She dreamed of a school, a place where children, abandoned by cruel circumstances, could find knowledge, safety, and hope. Meanwhile, Nolitha's house started to feel empty. Her husband traveled more, friends stopped visiting, and her laughter became forced. She began to notice whispers, the villagers talking, eyes darting toward her, rumors she could not control. One morning, her servant said cautiously, "Ma'am, some villagers say your stepdaughter, Amara, she's become a healer." Nalitha laughed nervously. "Impossible," she said. "She's nothing." And nobody left in the forest. Yet, a seed of doubt had been planted. By the age of 20, Amara's reputation had grown far and wide. Her calm presence and extraordinary knowledge of herbs earned her respect. Even the elders who once doubted her bowed their heads when she walked into the village square. One evening, while she was tending to her small garden under the orange glow of sunset, a messenger arrived at Makina's hut. "Someone is asking for your services," he said, handing her a small letter. Amara opened it. Her heart skipped a beat. It was from the city, from the magistrate's office requesting her to visit and help with a rare case of illness. It was early morning when a carriage arrived at the village. Nolitha, now weary and anxious, was attending to her morning chores. Her hands shook slightly as she carried water from the well. A stranger approached, dressed in city clothes, holding a letter. "Ma'am," the messenger said, "this is for you. It's urgent." Nolitha took the letter, unfolding the paper. Her eyes scanned the words. "A healer is requested at the magistrate's office for immediate assistance." Confusion crossed her face. She set the letter down. "A healer? This is irrelevant," she murmured. But as the day wore on, rumors spread quickly. "She is coming. The girl you abandoned. She has returned. People say she saves lives across villages now." Nolitha laughed nervously, trying to dismiss it. "Impossible," she whispered. "That child died long ago." Meanwhile, Amara had arrived at the village. She was taller, confident, and calm. Her eyes, once wide with fear, now shone with intelligence and purpose. She walked with quiet authority, her presence commanding respect without a single word. Villagers paused and stared. Whispers spread like fire. "Is that Amara? She's grown into a woman of wisdom." Amara's gaze swept over the village. Nothing felt the same except the lingering shadow of betrayal that Nolitha had cast years ago. She didn't enter the village square immediately. Instead, she went straight to the magistrate's office, fulfilling her duty. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the villagers' murmurings. Nolitha watched from a distance, her hands clutching the basket she carried. She tried to appear composed, but inside, fear churned. And then she saw her, Amara, standing tall, smiling politely at the magistrate as she discussed the case of a sick child. Her voice was soft, but her words carried authority. Nolitha's breath caught. The girl she had left in the forest was no longer a child. She was a woman, powerful, respected, untouchable. A cold sweat ran down Nolitha's back. "No, this cannot be," she whispered. The messenger noticed her panic. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Nolitha forced a laugh. I'm fine," she said. As the magistrate left, Amara approached the villagers. She walked slowly, deliberately, each step a message. "I am here. I survived. I thrived." The villagers parted respectfully. Nolitha's knees weakened. Memories flashed in her mind, the day she abandoned the child, the fear in her eyes, the helpless cries. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Amara's eyes met hers. Recognition. No anger. No gloating. Just quiet, calm, unyielding strength. Nolitha took a step back, as if trying to hide, but the villagers had noticed. Murmurs rose. "Is that? She's Amara. The one Nolitha abandoned?" Amara spoke softly, her voice carrying across the square. "Do you remember a little girl you left in the forest? The crowd fell silent. Even birds seemed to stop singing. Nolitha froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Amara's eyes never wavered. "Do you know what happens to those who abandon others?" she asked calmly. The villagers leaned closer, sensing the tension. "They live with the consequences of their actions," she continued. "And today, you will see them." The magistrate, sensing the shift, turned to Nolitha. "Ma'am, I believe this is a moment to speak truthfully." Nolitha's face paled. She had expected nothing. She had expected to continue life comfortably. But now, everything she feared was unraveling. Amara stepped closer and the crowd watched in awe. A girl abandoned became a woman unstoppable. A life once crushed had risen higher than the hand that tried to break it. The villagers held their breath. The stage was set for reckoning. The villagers gathered as Amara stood tall in the village square. Nolitha's face was pale, her hands trembling. She had expected no one to remember the child she abandoned years ago. She had assumed the world would forget. But today, the world was watching. Amara's voice, calm yet piercing, carried across the square. "Do you remember me?" Nolitha's lips quivered. I do," she stammered. "I am the little girl you left to die in the forest," Amara continued. "I survived because someone believed in me." A hush fell over the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Elders leaned forward. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The woman who once commanded fear was now silent. The little girl who was abandoned commanded respect. Nolitha tried to respond. I didn't mean... Amara raised a hand. "Words are meaningless without actions," she said softly. Her eyes scanned the villagers. "They know what you did," she continued. "They remember the cruelty, the neglect, the pain, and today, the truth stands before them." The villagers murmured among themselves. Some nodded. Some whispered shamefully. All eyes were on Nolitha. Nolitha turned to the crowd. I was wrong," she said shakily. Amara shook her head gently. "Acknowledgement is the first step, but it does not undo the past. Every action has consequences." Suddenly, the village healer, an elder who had watched Amara grow, stepped forward. "You left a child to suffer," he said sternly. "And now the village remembers." Nolitha looked around. She realized her social power had vanished. The laughter she once enjoyed, the respect she thought was hers by birth, all gone. No wealth, no beauty, no charm could protect her now. Only truth remained. Amara took another step forward. "You abandoned me." "But I was not broken. I grew. I learned. I healed. And now I choose mercy." The crowd gasped. "Mercy? After all this time?" "Yes," Amara said softly, her voice carrying through the village square. "Mercy does not erase what happened, but it shows that justice is not always anger. Sometimes it is strength." Nolitha sank to her knees. Tears flowed freely. I don't deserve." Amara placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "No, you don't, but everyone deserves a chance to witness the truth of their actions." From that moment, the villagers began to change how they viewed Nolitha. No longer a figure of fear, she became a figure of shame. Neighbors who had once envied her wealth now avoided her. Children who had once feared her now whispered stories of Amara's courage. Even her closest friends began to treat her with caution, recognizing the consequences of silence and cruelty. Amara turned to the villagers, her gaze calm but firm. "This is a lesson for all of us," she said. "The cruelty we hide will eventually be revealed. The love we neglect will one day seek justice, and the truth cannot be buried forever." The village absorbed every word, every adult, every elder, every child. A single voice, once silenced, had now echoed across the entire village. And it would not be forgotten. Nolitha tried to leave, but she found doors closed to her. Merchants refused to sell. Families declined her greetings. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be powerless. The abandoned child had not just survived. She had risen above, and the consequences of cruelty had arrived in full. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Amara walked to Makina's hut. "Did I do enough?" she asked the old woman. Makina smiled gently. "You did what no child could have imagined. You showed strength, mercy, and wisdom. That is the greatest victory." Amara looked back at the village from a small hilltop. She saw Nolitha, small and defeated, and realized, revenge is satisfying, but true power comes from rising above. The forest, the past, the abandonment, all had led to this moment, and Amara knew that her journey was far from over. The days after the confrontation were heavier than Nolitha ever imagined. For the first time in her life, she woke up to a silence that felt louder than any insult she had ever thrown at others. No respectful greetings waited for her outside her door, no warm smiles, no whispered praise, only cold distance. When she walked through the village market, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Women avoided her eyes. Men shook their heads in quiet disappointment. Even strangers seemed to know who she was and what she had done. The woman who once controlled rooms with fear had become invisible. Nolitha tried to hold on to her pride. She dressed in her finest clothes and wore her jewelry, hoping appearance could still command respect. It didn't. Wealth could not hide cruelty once the truth was known. Every step she took reminded her of what she had lost, not money, but honor. Meanwhile, life was changing for Amara. People began visiting Makina's small hut just to see her. Mothers brought their daughters and whispered that she was proof that pain does not decide a person's future. Elders invited her to village discussions, asking for her thoughts and listening carefully when she spoke. The girl once abandoned had become a symbol of strength. Despite the attention, Amara remained humble. She greeted everyone with kindness and spoke gently, never allowing bitterness to harden her heart. She carried her past with dignity, not anger. Back in her large house, Nolitha's world continued to collapse. Merchants refused to offer her credit. Old friends stopped visiting. Relatives who once relied on her generosity now avoided her entirely. In the evenings, she sat alone in rooms filled with expensive furniture that suddenly felt empty. One night, she remembered Amara's words. Every action has consequences. For the first time, fear settled in not fear of punishment, but fear of who she had become. She lowered herself to the floor and cried quietly, realizing that her tears could not erase the past. Then came the visit she never expected. Early one morning, footsteps stopped outside her door. When Nolitha opened it, her breath caught. Amara stood there, calm, steady, unafraid. "Why are you here?" Nolitha asked, her voice barely steady. "I came to see if you understand," Amara replied. Silence filled the space between them. "I do," Nolitha said at last, lowering her gaze. They sat together, the air heavy with memories. Nolitha's voice broke as she spoke. "I hated you because you reminded me of my own failures. I was cruel because I was empty inside." Tears streamed down her face, but Amara did not interrupt. She listened not as a broken child, but as a healed woman. "Understanding your pain does not erase mine," Amara said softly, "but it explains it." Amara stood and prepared to leave. "You cannot undo what you did," she continued, "but you can choose what you do next." Nolitha looked up, desperate. "Do you think I can change?" Amara paused. Change begins when humiliation turns into humility. She left without looking back. The village quickly learned of the visit. Some were angry, others confused. Why would she help someone so cruel? They asked. Makina answered calmly, "Forgiveness is not weakness. It is power." Slowly, Nolitha began to change, not for attention, but because isolation had stripped her pride away. She sold her jewelry to help struggling families. She worked quietly, without praise or excuses. She stopped defending her past. But redemption did not come easily. A broken reputation heals slowly. Yet a sincere heart, once awakened, can still grow. That night, Amara stood beneath the stars, thinking of everything she had survived. "I was abandoned," she whispered, "but I will not become bitterness." She knew the village would remember this story not as a tale of revenge, but as a lesson about truth, consequences, and grace. The village woke to a strange tension the next morning. People whispered as they fetched water and prepared for the day. Something was changing, and everyone could feel it. Nalitha's quiet efforts had not gone unnoticed. She helped without speaking, without demanding gratitude, yet trust does not return easily. And the village watched her carefully, unsure whether this change was real or temporary. Amara, meanwhile, felt a weight on her heart. Forgiving Nalitha had not brought instant peace. Some nights, memories still returned, cold nights, hunger, fear. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was choosing not to let the past control her future. That morning, the village elders called a public gathering. It was unusual. Important matters were usually discussed quietly, but this time, they wanted everyone to hear. People gathered beneath the large tree at the center of the village. Old men leaned on their sticks. Women stood with folded arms. Nalitha arrived last, her head lowered, unsure if she even belonged there. The chief spoke slowly. "This village has witnessed pain," he said, "and it has witnessed courage. Today, we must decide what kind of people we choose to be." He turned toward Amara. "You were wronged," he said gently. "Yet you returned with dignity, not revenge. Tell us, what do you want?" All eyes turned to Amara. Her voice was calm, but strong. "I do not want punishment," she said. "Punishment will not heal anyone. I want truth to be remembered and change to be proven." A murmur ran through the crowd. The chief then faced Nalitha. "Do you accept what you did?" he asked. Nalitha stepped forward, her hands shaking. "I do," she said. "I cannot change the past, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to correct it." She knelt before the village. "I am not asking to be forgiven," she continued. "I am asking to be allowed to change." Silence followed. Then, something unexpected happened. Makina stepped forward. "She abandoned a child," she said plainly, "but that child survived because kindness still existed in this village. If we destroy Nalitha completely, we destroy the lesson. Let her live with responsibility, not shame." The elders whispered among themselves. Finally, the chief spoke. "Nalitha will not be cast out," he said, "but she will serve this village, quietly, consistently, for as long as she lives here." Nalitha bowed her head, tears falling freely. "I accept," she whispered. As the crowd slowly dispersed, people looked at Amara with new respect. Some nodded. Some smiled. Others wiped their eyes. Later that evening, Nalitha approached Amara privately. "You didn't have to protect me," she said. "I didn't," Amara replied. "I protected myself. I refused to carry hatred any longer." Nalitha nodded, understanding for the first time what true strength looked like. That night, the village felt lighter, not because the past was erased, but because the future had finally been chosen. And for Amara, the hardest part of her journey was nearly complete. She had faced abandonment, cruelty, and humiliation, and she had won. Not by destroying her enemy, but by becoming something greater. The village was unusually calm in the days that followed. Not the silence of fear, but the quiet of reflection. People spoke differently now. With more care. With more awareness, children listened when elders spoke about kindness. Mothers reminded their daughters that strength did not always shout. Sometimes it forgave. And at the center of every conversation was Amara. Not because she demanded attention, but because her choices had changed the way people thought. Amara returned to her daily life, helping Makina, teaching the younger children, working with the women in the fields. She never spoke about what Nalitha had done to her unless someone asked, and even then, she spoke without anger. That, more than anything, stunned the village. Nalitha kept her promise. Every morning before sunrise, she swept the paths, fetched water for the elderly, and helped rebuild broken homes. She accepted insults without defending herself, When people ignored her, she continued working. Redemption was not given to her. It was earned slowly, painfully. One afternoon, a young girl approached Nolitha while she was working. "Are you really changing?" the girl asked. Nolitha stopped, looked at her hands, and answered honestly, "I am trying, every day." The girl nodded and walked away. It was the smallest moment, but to Nolitha, it felt like the beginning of forgiveness. Weeks later, the elders announced a new community project, a learning center for children who had no families to support them. When asked who should lead it, the answer surprised everyone. Amara. Amara hesitated. "I'm not special," she said. The chief smiled. "You are proof." The center was built with the help of the entire village. Nolitha worked there quietly, never claiming credit, never seeking recognition. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Amara stood outside the center and watched children laugh and learn. Nolitha approached her, careful not to intrude. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said softly, "but thank you for not letting my worst act define your future." Amara looked at her for a long moment. "Forgiveness is not a moment," she said. "It is a journey, just like change." They stood there in silence, not as enemies, not as family, but as two women shaped by choices, one who endured and one who learned too late. As years passed, the story spread beyond the village. People told it not as a tale of cruelty, but as a lesson that abandonment does not destroy destiny, that power without compassion leads to ruin, and that true victory is not revenge but dignity. Amara grew into a leader respected far beyond her village. Nolitha grew into a woman remembered not for who she was, but for who she became after she fell, and the village learned a truth it would never forget. The past can wound you, but it does not get to decide who you become. This was not just a story. It was a warning, a lesson, and a reminder that kindness, once chosen, can change everything.